My name is Toltu Tufa and I'm a practicing psychologist based in Melbourne, Victoria, in Australia. I've been seeing lots of exhaustion and lots of burnout. I found that a lot of people have been taken by surprise when they've approached COVID. Most of us thought this was a 2-month issue, and lo and behold, years later, we're still dealing with the effects of COVID-19. I think most importantly, self-compassion is going to be something that's particularly important as we come out of COVID. A good way to stay informed is to find a mechanism that you trust that is credible. And so I like to think that finding one main source of information is important, because credibility and stability is important for reducing people's anxiety or feelings of stress. I personally followed the Premier of Victoria, Daniel Andrews, and then from his post I decided which websites I'd go to and see in order to get updated. But each to their own. That's a really good question. What I've heard from a lot of people are those that tend to make it through COVID or COVID-related stresses are those people that have rituals or practices or routines that support their well-being. I like to call them buffers. So, thinking about the buffers that you have in your life, and they don't need to be expensive, they don't need to be over the top, they can be simple, quirky, and even free things that keep you going. As a psychologist, I do a lot of telehealth, and often I decide at the end of a long day where I may have spent 8 hours in front of the computer, I like to engage in a practice where I close my laptop mindfully and just say, all right, shut my laptop and pull the door closed. And that ritual for me is a buffer that allows me to decide when work is completed. That's a really hard one. I think before giving any advice, we need to acknowledge exactly how much of a difficult situation that is when people that you've established long-term relationships with, people who are your family, who are your friends, who are your loved ones, are starting to actually divide on something that you never expected to challenge your relationship. So I think it's really important to actually spend the time to grieve the fact that there's a disconnect between you and someone that you love. And I think it's important to call it out and choose where you're going to put your focus on that relationship, because what you focus on will grow. So if you continue to focus on the disconnect, it might mean that the relationship may not survive. Whereas if you choose to focus on what's keeping you together, then while you're going through a difficult time with your family and your friends, perhaps at some point you can rejoin and take away the disconnect that's affecting your relationship. So I think a conversation that I often suggest for people to have with people they're having disagreements is to think about what values are important to them. So if you value connection, it might be you say to your family, look, I really respect you, I really value your connection, and for that reason COVID is something I can't have a conversation with you about. Uncertainty is something that's often followed by symptoms of stress and anxiety, and the reason why is because we don't know what's going to happen. We try and fill in gaps, and when we try to fill the gaps and we can't, that brings up a greater sense of uncertainty for a lot of people. So similar to the question about how to deal with family members whose responses you may not be able to anticipate, a good way to navigate uncertainty is to pivot or shift your position to that of certainty. And think about, what is it that you're certain about in this situation that has a lot of uncertainty? And that is the space I would be positioning myself in order to make decisions, and honouring that will be really important. That's a really, really good question. Often people will say, I'm feeling the blues, I'm feeling upset, that's just normal, this is how I'm meant to be. And I think part of experiencing COVID-19 might result in some of those unhelpful or those uncomfortable emotions and thoughts, and that's okay. I think we need to acknowledge and normalise that these things do happen, our reactions are quite normal. And I think if the symptoms you're experiencing, or inability to get out of bed, or feeling really blue and upset, constantly having a short fuse, lasts for a period longer than 2 weeks, that might be a good time to talk to a health professional. And a good way of thinking about it is that who you disclose to will be someone that will hold space for you, give you different options in terms of what's available, and acknowledge the difficulty that you're going through. So within Australia, our healthcare system provides mental health care plans which enables people to see their local psychologist at subsidised rates. And this is something that has happened in the past from between 8 to 10 sessions. Since the start of COVID-19, that's been expanded to 20 sessions. And it's usually based on a calendar year, which might be exactly what some people are looking for to just get them back on track.